America's foremost authority on etiquette, Miss Amy Vanderbilt.
Well, I like considerate smokers. For instance, I like to know that my husband is considerate enough to carry my brand of cigarette. And that, as I'm sure you can guess from my being here, is Lucky Strike.
How did Amy Vanderbilt go from being one of the most famous women in America, with appearances on every talk show, 5 million copies of her books sold, weekly columns in hundreds of newspapers, many, many endorsements, to becoming almost completely forgotten? What does this have to do with the Pope, Alfred Hitchcock, and Anderson Cooper? When I was a kid, my mom used to shop at thrift stores for hours on end. She'd peruse through every single rack. And I used to kill the time by looking through books. And I came across these books a good 20 years ago that are about how to set and care for your hair and how to have teas, how to have correspondence. So these 50s, 60s books. Now, originally when I bought them, I was thinking like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'll get my friends together. We're going to have a cute little party. We'll pretend that we're like 50s, 60s ladies and we're like super deferential to our husbands and it'll be so cute and hilarious. These books, if you look closely, they're all part of the Amy Vanderbilt Success Program for Women. But none of them are written by her, which I was like, oh, that's odd. So who is this Amy Vanderbilt and what is the Success Program? I had to know. Her life story was way more wild than I was expecting. It was a lot more Peggy Olson than it was Betty Crocker. Okay, so she's married 4 times, divorced 3 times. She was extremely famous in her time. She was like the Emily Post of the 50s, 60s, 70s. And she's like this huge IMDb page. She was on all of your great-grandparents' or grandparents' favorite talk shows. So wait a minute, like Vanderbilt's, the Vanderbilt, there's Cornelius Vanderbilt, super rich, like railway baron, 1800s. Anderson Cooper's mom was a Vanderbilt. That's actually an interesting aside where she was like a famous orphan baby and there's a big fight over her money when she was little. Now, I think early on Amy was sort of implying that she was one of the Vanderbilts. Like she talks a lot about her Dutch heritage in her books and she likes to mention her Dutch roots a lot and talks a lot about how her family's been there since the 1600s or 1700s or something. Now, when I looked into it, with my very bad genealogy skills, it appears that she's not actually descendant from the Cornelius the Rich, like Vanderbilt line. And I found some lovely woman's genealogy blog. And according to this lady's research, so that's my source, Amy Vanderbilt was a not descendant. So she's like third or fourth cousins removed. She's very much not of the rich Vanderbilt line. So she's like a really distant cousin. So I think the whole calling him his or her cousin and all like her obituaries talk about how she's a cousin of Cornelius Vanderbilt. I think that's like a total stretch. And I think she leaned into it knowing that it was going to help her because of course a Vanderbilt would know how to have good manners. Rewinding a little bit further, Amy Vanderbilt grew up in Long Island. She went to high school there. She became a journalist. She went to journalism school there. There were some early mentions in some early articles and books about her going to private boarding school in Switzerland, but then that part gets dropped and I can't find it anywhere else. So I couldn't verify that, and I don't know if that was just early marketing about what a fancy lady she was. But her dad was an insurance salesman. She seemed to have had a pretty modest early childhood. She dropped out of journalism school and became a journalist and then moved into becoming an advertising executive in the 30s and 40s. So super early, like before Peggy Olson did it. Peggy Olson's not real, I know. But anyway, before Peggy Olson did it, Amy Vanderbilt was an advertising executive, which is pretty cool. Now, in the 1940s, she managed to secure herself a book contract to write the ultimate tome on manners, how to invite homosexuals to dinner, how to send a letter to somebody who just got fired, how to visit the White House or go visit the Pope. The book covers quite a bit. One of my personal favorite pieces of advice was her advice for the newfangled technology of answering machines. And she suggested that young women try leaving messages saying, "Hello, I am home working with several other people right now, not alone." So I wonder if that fooled the early burglars who were trying to call. So books released, she becomes a big star. So she's over 5 million copies of her books sold. 5 million. So big money, big success, yada, 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 mysterious death, which is probably why you're here. But anyway, in 1967, New York, brownstone, she falls out or jumps out of her second-story office of her brownstone. Now she's wearing a light flowered dress, house coat, and no shoes. And so her body was found 2 feet from the door of the house. And one of my favorite details was that apparently she was found the article says that she was found at the exact same moment that her husband also noticed she was dead. So they paint a picture like a person walked up and was like, Amy Vanderbilt's dead body. And her husband like, "Oh, my wife. Wow, same moment she was discovered," which I found kind of odd. Also, interesting fact that I'm sure is unrelated to her death in any way. She was, at the time of her death, worth an estimated $500,000 or the equivalent of $45 million today. So that's nice for her husband, her surviving husband, who discovered her at the same time as the passerby. So, in my opinion, it was a pretty quick investigation, and that's a crazy death, no? How did she fall out of a second-story window, you ask? Her family blames her hypertension. Apparently, she had been in her house and had way less engagements in the last year or so of her life because of her health. And her family thinks her hypertension medicine might have made her dizzy, or she could have jumped, apparently, according to the police. They did a very quick investigation by the look of it, a day or so. And so I guess her hypertension medicine killed her. I mean, I don't want to speculate. I know that I could imagine Amy Vanderbilt would find it quite rude for me to speculate. I don't know, but it does seem a little odd for her to have just fallen out of her office window and died. But so really, to sum up, like, these books that I found that I was like, look at these old-fashioned women. Interesting, like how so easy to kind of paint, like for me anyway, it's so easy for me to just have this idea of like these kind of idiotic, simplified people in the past, when really they were like people too and way more complicated. So I don't think I'm going to have that little mawkish party. In fact, I feel like I should, get some Lucky Stripes. Whatever the cigarettes are that she endorsed. I should get some of those, and I don't even smoke, but I should get some of those and have a party and salute Amy Vanderbilt and her like self-made empire. Also, when I was going through all her crazy many endorsements, I found I really enjoyed this. There's like a celebrity speaker series with Amy Vanderbilt, Alfred Hitchcock, and this dude who tells you why women need to protect men's privacy or respect men's privacy. I'm not sure why women's privacy is not part of it. I'm sure maybe they get to that. Maybe that was another session that they did, but anyway. So, thanks for watching if you watched this far. Feel free to subscribe if you wanna. I'm not gonna ask you to. I think Amy would think that is impolite. But thanks for watching.